Earlier this year, a devastating heatwave in the Pacific Northwest of the US killed almost 200 people with a sequence of record shattering temperatures. And in 2019, the UK recorded its highest ever temperature of 38.7 degrees. And that happened right here where I am in Cambridge. Now, alarmingly, new research from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology suggests that there is more of this, unfortunately, to come. And Eva Higginbotham heard why from Eric Fisher.
So what we found is that the probability of these type of heat records that will go way beyond anything that's previously observed rapidly increases these days. While we had little warming up to the 1980s, the warming really picked up and has been accelerating since, and we're currently warming at a very high rate. And we demonstrate that this pace, the speed of warming, which is currently so high, is really the important factor that leads to the fact that we're going to see substantially more of these type of events and continue to see these type of events in the coming decades.
And why are the record-breaking events so important? If you have a week or two of very hot weather, I would have imagined that that would be less important than, several years where you're climbing every single year.
Well, it depends a little bit on the type of impacts we're thinking about. But we know from the Canadian heat wave in the last weeks that we could, for instance, see a very strong increase in mortality, that we see substantially more fatalities than in a normal summer, particularly in these very hot episodes. And what we realized is that particularly the first time such very high temperatures occur, it really hits us unprepared. There's good evidence that after 2003, similar events occurred in 2015 and 2018, at least but on a somewhat shorter timescales. But what we could clearly see that many countries had suddenly heat warning systems in place. They had public warning. They had elderly homes that would inform the most vulnerable people how to better handle this heat. And usually we would hope to see that once these events happen again, we would see less severe consequences, for instance, on mortality.
And what mitigations do you think are needed, aside from generally, trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, etc.? What can we do to prevent the risk of these extreme heat waves coming in the future?
I think what we really need to do is to think beyond the weather we've observed over the last few decades. And we need to understand that we haven't seen anything close to the most intense heat wave possible under present day conditions. We've only experienced about 5 to 10 years at this level of warming. And it takes a while until really we do actually see what we need to expect. But if we currently build new houses, if we currently build new infrastructure, it's very important not only to look back, because the observations we've seen over the last decades are no longer representative of today's climate, and let alone the climate we expect in the coming 2-3 decades.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it's human nature to think, well, this is the worst it could get. Well, this is the worst it could get. Well, this is the worst it could get, as it continues to increase every time.
That's correct. I mean, one of the reasons why the damage is so large, because it's just a natural behavior that we have some experience, and that's the highest we prepare. So the worst flood we've seen, or maybe our parents have seen, or the grandparents talked about, this is the level we tend to prepare for. Even if we have all the science to tell us it could actually get worse, usually we really need to first see it until we believe it. And then what we clearly see now in the German floods, for instance, after events unfold, all the policymakers and so go in and suddenly try to take action so that hopefully we are better prepared for the next event.
Preparation's everything, isn't it? Eric Fisher there from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and his paper describing that work has just come out in the journal Nature Climate Change.